Welcome to Sword and Shield, the official podcast of the 960th Cyberspace Wing. Join us for insight, knowledge, mentorship, and some fun as we discuss relevant topics in and around our wing. Please understand that the views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the views of the U.S. Air Force nor the Air Force Reserve, and no endorsement of any particular person or business is ever intended.
Welcome to the Sword and Shield podcast. I'm Colonel Rick Erredge, 960th Cyberspace Wing Commander.
And I'm Chief Master Sgt. Chris Howard, Superintendent, 960th COG.
Hey, welcome, Chief.
Good to see you, sir. It's been a rough week.
It's been a really rough week, absolutely. Right. And we're looking at Sam here, too. And so all of us have had different types of rough weeks and some worse than others.
Definitely. I mean, when you look at the 960th as a whole, we've had at least 2 to 3 bases just get slammed with winter weather that was outside of the norm. And then infrastructure issues here at JBSA, right? We had to get down to emergency crews only at one point. It was definitely something you wouldn't expect in Texas. I left Colorado for a reason, and then I come down here, and it's been crazy, sir.
We keep saying the same thing, and people, you're from Minnesota. This is easy. I'm like, no, it doesn't make it any easier. I left there because I want better weather.
Right. Well, the cold wasn't so bad, right? You get prepared, and you know how to drive in it, but when the infrastructure itself isn't built to hold it, and then you start getting dealt a couple of other blows like road conditions because they're just not prepared for it, or it just becomes overwhelming quite quickly. Same thing with the water and the power. It all adds up real quick.
Yeah, you find some things. I'd never really thought about growing in Minnesota my whole life. We never had water issues when we had cold weather. Is this something that we learned, I guess, 2 generations before that? In Texas, they don't have a need to do that.
Right. Definitely.
And I think, and so you start thinking about the cascading effects and how bad it gets. And, there's still people that are still struggling. We got some friends up in Austin that just got power back today. It's 6 days without power and they still don't have water.
Right.
And for native Texans
That's
and
rough.
People, it's rough. So,
definitely.
So I started thinking about, I've been reflecting this week about all the things that has been going on, at least since the time I took command. And when I went to the wing commander training, they said, you will get your opportunity to lead in crisis.
Yes.
We talked about crisis, but it was right before COVID when I went to the training, and they talked about through the lens of kind of a military buildup for some sort of extreme event, right? It wasn't about a pandemic, wasn't about extreme weather or storms, wasn't about this extremism or polarizing politics that have started to shape kind of where we are right now in the world.
Right. And it definitely, I know we've talked about resiliency. It definitely, those items alone, when taken out one by one, if it was just one, and then if it was just this one or just that one, I think that most people would just bounce back quite quickly, right? When we start putting in the fact that we're going on close to a year with COVID restrictions, that huge paradigm shift. Now we throw in the politics, the extremism, and then other issues.
Racial inequality.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it seems like it's a time and just change, right?
Right.
New administration, new chief of staff, new chief master sergeant of the Air Force.
Yes.
All good things can come out of it, but I think it's just piling on, like you said, of just over and over and over again. And I think the uncertainty around funding, right? And that's always been a constant, but it doesn't mean it's easier to deal with all the time.
No. And then when that all comes together and puts on top of that, that's what's going to be the cherry or what's going to be the straw that breaks the airman's back, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what we got to think a lot about of what is. And for somebody, it's probably different than somebody else.
Right.
And I made the comment last week to my wife, I said, hey, so it's been just about a year with this COVID thing. I think I'm finally kind of just comfortable with what we're doing. I'm comfortable in myself, not necessarily comfortable what's doing to other people.
No, good point, right? You found probably that balance, and the next piece will add its weight, or you'll be able to bounce it back. It's just now how do we lead through this problem with our airmen, right? How do we get them to be in that same safe space to navigate that?
Yeah, and not that I like it, but you just find ways to kind of deal with it and put it in your mind and kind of march on. And so it seems like 2 weeks ago now. It probably was 2 weeks ago. We were talking to Major Gamara,
right,
and out in the hallway here in the building, and you know, she's always good for challenging us,
yes,
and asking really tough questions, and I appreciate that about her. And we've had a couple other people that said, "Hey, everything's not always rosy. It's not rainbows and unicorns all the time,
yes,
even though we'd like it to be.
Yes,
like we should talk about some of these really hard things." And so I think this, with everything kind of piling on, it's probably a good time for us to kind of talk about what kind of things we're thinking about and the struggles that kind of you and I go through together, and then individually the things that we're thinking about, and the things that kind of are on our minds all the time.
Right. And I think also they were looking for some individual skills that we could give them so they could help use those and maybe get them through those processes.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm a closet journaler. And so I found myself journaling or writing more than normal over probably the past 6 months. And that has helped me as far as an individual coping skill, is just put my words down on paper. I don't worry about it making sense. And I'm not actually writing, I'm typing. And so I just put it in a document. And like when I'm going throughout the day, like, hey man, this is really bugging me, I'll write a note in my schedule of events to do. And then usually on the weekend, then I sit down when it's quiet and just start banging away. And so the last thing I wrote about was this concept of extremism.
Okay.
And what I got to the end with was I usually kind of work my way through my thoughts, and I go, okay, what would I do, or how would I help? And I got to the end of this one. I said, I don't know if there's a good answer. Well, like I had a hard time trying to figure out how I need to talk about this with our organization and with our unit and all of our airmen.
I don't think it's one of those easy subjects because, I mean, it's like a couple of other subjects, you know, with the racial inequality and diversity, inclusion. It's where does the line really cross, right? What's the right level of this or that to make it correct? With extremism, the word extremism alone is a no-go, right? So, but where do we find the line of what is just being excited and trying to be patriotic to what is extreme, or at what point are you pushing into anarchy and into other things? I think one thing that I found, I think I shared with you, was politics, right? We talk about right, we talk about left. We talk about it almost like it's a straight line. Mm-hmm. I go back to high school, and my history teacher, Lunsford, he says, no, really, the reality is politics is a circle. So we talk about the center. It's really, you can say it's on the top of the circle. And when we talk about extremism, left or right, they almost come together on the bottom of that circle, right? Because a lot of the same things are happening, right? So we're taking away from what our Constitution is saying. We're taking away from civil, law. We're taking away from those things that defines us as a nation. And that's where that far right, far left portions come into play. And it's really about taking away control of the individual voter and taking away the control of individuals as a whole, and then taking it beyond what is considered lawful protest and even civil discussions, so that we can actually move in a way that we as a nation need to move forward in, right? And taking that whole piece beyond what is necessary or what's right. It's really hard not to get wrapped up into some of these things, right? Whether you believe that X was right or Y was incorrect or Y was correct and everything. Reality is that as military members, it's a zero tolerance, right? What did our leadership tell us to do? It was a lawful order. Mm-hmm. You go forth and conquer, right? We had elections. They were done, decided, move on, right? These things that we have no control over. Did you do your piece as a citizen? Yes or no, right? And then
there's always emotion, right? I mean, that's the hard part. When emotion gets attached to a train of thought or a line of thought, it can escalate really fast. Yes. And that's what we don't want. We're not trying to escalate, but I think there's got to be some way for us to have that civil discussion and be able to talk about it and then the concept of a dialogue.
Yes.
Of a healthy dialogue of any organization needs to understand each other and that where the inclusion comes. And so I tried to frame this in my mind of, so I ended up thinking about the concept of belonging. Right. And so, because the word extremism, like you said, it's hard to define, right? Yes. And everybody's going to try to define it their own way, and that's not helpful. No. So when I think about belonging, in college, I took a gang class, and the one thing I learned from that was that people join gangs and cults or extreme, if you would call them extremists, or they join any organization because they feel like they belong.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And so people are finding these opportunities with the technology that we have available to us. It's really easy to connect people now. Right. Where before, you had to go down some shady back alley to figure out what this organization was doing in a garage to join it. And then it was word of mouth, right? They didn't have a way of, now it grows so fast and can just jump in and I follow a couple of social media sites. I don't want to say for fun, but for knowledge and informing. And so I know we talk about it off quite a bit. Sam and I talk about a couple of them quite a bit because there's always just trying to figure out what's going on. And I think I watch it, and now I'm looking at through the lens of this, of people jumping to one side or the other on every topic. Like it's always one way or the other. It's all leadership's terrible, or this is the great thing, and this is the best thing that's going on in the entire world. Like, it's frustrating.
It is, and it's almost, and I'm not trying to take away from it. It's almost silly, right? In the fact that when we get to these conversation pieces, it's black or it's white, right? It's
no gray.
Yet, and this is where I find it funny is we live in the gray. Everybody lives in the gray, right? It comes to interpretation, it comes to opinion, it comes to even how do I interpret these rules? We all live in the gray, but for some reason, instead of having a discussion of understanding that there's space for both of these sides to be together, we have to take a hard stance as, no, it has to be this way or that way. The harsh reality is like in my family, right? My kids don't see the things I do the same way because, they didn't experience the same things I grew up, right? And even me and my wife, we don't necessarily see everything the same way. But does that mean it has to be this way or that way? No.
That's probably what keeps family together too, right? I mean, if everybody, I talk about this a lot, my dad votes one way, and my mom, no matter what she feels like, she votes opposite of him just to counter. She feels like she got to counterbalance the force,
right?
And so they get along great, and it works. And that's what I kind of think about, bringing that kind of, we can have a good, robust debate,
right?
Peaceful, kind of a little bit of emotion attached, but in a sense of to understand where you're coming from,
right?
Understand what you're thinking, so that we can be closer as a team.
No, I agree. I think that having those discussions and being able to open up and share that without a sense of reprisal or a judgment.
Sure.
I think that would definitely do a lot of the smaller teams good, right? And kind of going back to your gang piece. I remember in basic training, we had some of these conversations in basic training of you're part of a new subculture, right? And it's really whether you defined it.
Sure.
The military had, and how did they define what culture was, what a subculture began with, and it comes to jargon, it comes to experiences, it comes to the sense of belonging, and that's one thing that I really like to highlight with our members is that you are part of something bigger, right? Don't get pulled out of this subculture. Don't be pulled away from this gang or whatever, however you want to put it, this family, by dividing it so black and white, right? You're part of this, right? You're going to be judged on your abilities, your attitude, and your capability. And that's it. Anything else, you're part of the team bringing something to the table, and you're valued. And that's what we push on our leadership across the board is you need to value those individuals. You need to value people bringing something new to the table. You have to include them into the conversation because I don't know how to break it to you. You don't know everything. Right? Yeah. And that's something I know that when I was a young bullheaded staff sergeant was hard sometimes. That I thought I knew it. I was going forth and conquering, right? I was a stubborn senior airman, and had a couple of NCOs and senior NCOs pull me off the side and say, well, why are you thinking this way? Why are you thinking that way? Give you some food for thought and really helped adjust.
Yeah, just different perspective, right?
Right. Yes.
And I don't know if we've lost that over time or whether it's the art of experience. And so what I want to try to do is create opportunities for that to happen. We talk about using the small group discussion as a way to get people to feel more comfortable about that and having those discussions. And I know certainly I'm uncomfortable a lot of times talking about it, but that just means we got to talk about it more.
Right.
And it doesn't mean we talk about it until we get comfortable about it, but no, that's not what I mean. What I mean is having more opportunities to discuss it, to create and essentially helping people feel like they belong, even if it's through, hey, Chris, you think differently than I do, but we're still on the same team.
Right.
It's still the same family. Yes. I got you. I know you got my back. And I got yours.
I agree. And I think that I'm actually looking forward to some of the changes that we're looking at, especially when we talk about UTCs and deployments. If we go back to that full wing deployment perspective, maybe we'll get some of that common ground. Right. The fact that we start spilling some of getting muddy in the same places, right. Doing some of the same things, in having to endure the suck together. Yep. That's really what we talk about, that bonding. I remember recently watching a TED talk by an individual, I believe his name was Younger. And he was talking about, you talk to soldiers and airmen and Marines, and you talk to that have deployed, and they talk about missing war. And it really came down to because that they felt that someone had their back. I think that nowadays with the malign influence and all of these things that we've already identified, that people don't feel like they can trust individuals, right? That they don't feel like they have their back. And going back to that TED Talk, it was really about, I know that my brothers and sisters in arms had my back. I want to be in a place where, yes, bullets are flying, but I'm safe because this person's with me. That person's with me. They've got my back.
It's an interesting concept, right? Especially the Marines, they take that team to the ultimate, and they have to, right, to rely on for their survival. Right. And I've heard that from a number of people that when they retire, the hardest, the thing they miss most and the hardest thing about civilian life is just having, that brother sisterhood.
No, I totally can relate. I was in some small teams doing a lot of different deployments, doing different things. And it really came down that I could trust this person or that person with my life. I could trust them with my wife. I could trust them with my money, my wallet, whatever. I trusted them wholeheartedly. And that's what made the day go by. And I think that's one of the challenges that as leaders that we have to develop that in these work centers, in these small teams, and then help foster that culture within the 960th is if you call me, I'm going to be there, right? Or if you need something, there's going to be someone that's going to step up and take care of you and help you out. That we do really care and that we've got your back so that we can get past all of these things that are getting piled upon us. And that goes back to some of the things that you've discussed, are right, about making the phone calls, about getting engaged, being that overbearing almost leadership, right? That intrusive leadership. Because if we don't show individuals that we care, and if we don't actually do what we say we're going to do, then no one's going to trust, no one's going to feel safe, and then we're just going to continue to watch this cultural road.
Yeah, I remember, I think you said it well when I did some exercise, right? Going to the ORI, man, you plan for it, you hate it. But I remember each time at the end of it going, man, I feel like we bonded and gelled as a team. I remember specifically as a captain, I was the Persco dude, and getting back after that, and the people that deployed with us, we had a different experience. Mm-hmm. And it was just different, and it felt different. And I'm really concerned about, we don't necessarily have that same ability in our business in this wing other than combat comm,
right?
To really recreate that. And we have to find different ways to create that bond. And so there's so many other threats out there that are chipping away at that and chipping away at that bond and making it really hard for us, internal and external threats.
Yes.
And so including stuff we're doing to ourselves, right? There's fratricide going on as well. and so we just have to do it with people.
Yes.
People to people.
Right. And that takes so what I do, you talked about journaling. What I do is, I guess, more talk therapy. Right.
Sure.
I'm reaching out and talking.
It's the same version of journaling, right? Just talking to people.
I'm talking to those individuals that I trust. I'm talking to the individuals that I care about. I'm reaching out and trying to make phone calls on a regular basis to individuals to make sure that they know that pathway is open, and just to say hi. Some of my old friends I'll talk to. I'll talk to coworkers just to make sure that they're doing okay. Just building that network so that network is strong, so that when someone feels like they can't handle it alone, that they know that I've done it, and that they can come to me, and I'm going to provide the same kind of level of conversation and bonding with them.
Yeah, and so you've demonstrated that and built their trust,
hopefully,
through that way, right? that they're going to call on you when you need to, and we just got to find ways to do that. And
sure,
my way has been similar as well, is that I like to listen, just give people an ear, and at the end of it say, okay, what can I do? How can I help? And sometimes it's, I just need you to listen. Like, I didn't need you to do anything.
Right.
I just need to talk to somebody. I'm like, cool. That's what I'm here for. And there's other times where, I've had to be more forceful, where I see somebody that's not gelling being part of the team, try to pull them aside, say, hey, what's going on? What are you feeling? Right. And they kind of, no, I'm fine. And like, you just got to try to dig. And that kind of helps me with my own personal resilience as well, and gets me more engaged. And it feels like, and I try to demonstrate that so that other people know that I'm there for them too.
Right. Because words can be cheap or expensive, depending on how you use them, right? It's easy to say and it's harder to back up. That's where the expense comes in. And if you don't back it up, it's the most expensive.
Absolutely.
Right?
And we don't want to have to cash in anything if we lose people.
I think Colonel Darden is able to coin that very well. I forget the words that he uses, but yes, words matter for one, but then I think he has something that with how much that they can actually cost you.
Yeah. So I've heard people talk about thinking about, when you're talking to people, building your bank account. Like every time you talk to somebody and you do something good, right? That's a debit that's going to the bank account. And then when they need it, they can come cash it out. Right. And you need to do more debits and credits. Like, you need to give more than you take in order to keep people. And that's harder for some folks. And I know in our business in cyber and intel, a lot of folks, like, we live in secrets all the time in business we do. And so a lot of us feel comfortable just kind of keeping it inside and not want to talk about it. But our job as leaders is to find those avenues, give people opportunities to reach out
and shed the stigma, right? That it's not okay to talk. It's not okay not to be okay, right? The fact is that there's everyone has a bad day. And everybody needs something along the way. It's when you hide it. It's when you don't get the help that leads you down decision pathways that don't work, which then lead to the problems, right? But if you need somebody, I think that everybody should know that it's open there and it's not going to affect you.
Yeah, I think that's what I've seen a huge change in my career, is this openness, this discussion about innovation and picking people's brains and giving them problems. It's when I grew up, it was empower, right? But it's usually like, just get the work done. Like, do it. My empowerment was get the work done, but do it my way, right?
It was in some ways, right? Empowerment was a buzzword, right? Mentorship was again a buzzword. What we look at airman development, when we talk about team building, we talk about that innovation piece, we're taking that buzzword and we're having to actually implement it, right? Because what we found is those buzzwords, they're cheap to say, but they're expensive in regards to retention. Look at the retention rates, right? If we're not truly empowering them, i.e. just here's the target and letting individuals get there with a couple of right and left boundaries, what they feel is either micromanaged or left in the dark. So I empowered you, but I left you in the dark. So that's lays off fair leadership, right? Or if it's my way, now it's micromanagement. You really have to allow individuals to fail forward. Kind of gets after, the accelerate, change, or lose. Even if we look at the ABCD piece that just came out from General Brown, all of that gets after the fact that those words are not buzzwords. These are implementations we're going forward with And we want to see change. We want to see that diversity in thought. We want to see everybody included, because it's going to cost us in the long run. When we look at the great power competition, if we are constantly handcuffing our wrist to our ankle, we're going to fail. We have to get after those problems.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that from the diversity inclusion aspect. I think about everybody thinks a certain way based on your experiences.
Correct.
Right. And we need more different experiences as part of our team.
Right.
Then we need a bunch of, and people always, they jump to the, and I think it's shocking that even when I walk in a room somewhere, everybody looks like me. Like almost, I remember standing next to Colonel Jones in one meeting, and she's like, look around the room. She's like, I'm the only woman in here. I'm like, wow. Like, again, I had never thought of it from that aspect. My mind's thinking about business and operations. And so I think a lot about, hey, bringing those other people around us, getting them on board. And we really want to make sure that we're giving them opportunities to voice, because in our business, right, I want to give you that target, and I'm going to let you go. Because there's probably 10 different ways in order for you to get at that. And the team will figure out the best way to do that. Just give you space and put whatever buzzword on you want. That's not important to me. If it's empowerment, if it's team building, it's about getting after it and giving you the space to do it and celebrating, I think we should celebrate as much as we can. And even if we fail and we don't get a target, I think you still learn from that. And that's just as important. Sometimes you learn more from defeat than you do from winning.
But definitely, because if you didn't fail, then what did you really learn? Right. No. I mean, did you challenge yourself enough? Right. I think that, from a leadership perspective, I found more joy in watching those small teams or those individuals take on a challenge that they never felt like they could take on, trip up a little bit, and then
watch them grow.
Right. Yeah. And then actually succeed after that problem set. Right. I mean, I think looking back at the Wing priorities over the last year, how many, walls did we hit? How many barriers did we hit? And how many different ways did we try to come after these problem sets, to where we're starting to see some people building the ladders over the barriers, finding ways around the barrier, under the barrier, in all different directions, even lobbing far away.
And they're all good, right?
Yes,
those are all good. Those are all good opportunities.
Yes, but when you're standing in front of that wall, you don't necessarily see that. That's why you have to pass it back. You have to pass it right, pass it left, and let those other team members run with the ball and see where we go.
Yeah, and there's no shortage of challenges, no shortage of problems in the future, and for us to say we're going to solve everything, we got a plan for everything, I think that would be unfair and naive,
complete lie.
But we just got to face all these things head on, and I think that's what I think about. What's the next thing up, and if we were to fast forward and get in our time machine, jump to a year from now, there are probably going to be things that we'd faced that I couldn't write on paper right now.
I know.
Just like a year ago.
Yeah, about to say, if we reversed a year ago, we definitely wouldn't be saying, hey, I wonder I think we would have said this, and that would have already been done. That, we would have had those leadership offsites in Robbins. We would have had a bunch of other leadership opportunities. We would have seen a couple of other units grow in different directions. We would have seen mission sets change in some other ways. But because of all of these different changes and everything, we're definitely in a different seat. Yeah,
and I think that the common theme for me is, the airmen. We persevere with the airmen. Some people call it on the backs of the airmen. Kind of is like it takes all of us here to pick up and do our piece and be part of the team. And sometimes I'm carrying more load than other times, and we're going to ask everybody to pick up their load and the teams and pick everybody else up around them.
Gotcha.
And keep plugging away.
I definitely like to think of it more as a scrum. Right? From rugby. We're all tied in together, and it's only based on the force of all of us together that moves us forward than anyone. So no one's getting treaded over. It's just all of us driving in the same direction. Sometimes we have to, hit a flank, but we're definitely as a scrum together, tight knit and moving forward.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, thanks, Chief. Appreciate your time. And
thank you, sir.
Until the next challenge.
Yes, sir.